What if the shows we binge-watch late at night, the movies we quote endlessly, and the stories we hold close to our hearts were more than entertainment? What if hidden beneath the surface of your favorite show lies a deep well of philosophy, a mirror reflecting the struggles, questions, and truths of human existence? Pop culture is not just about distraction or escape. It is a map of meaning, a modern mythology that tells us who we are and who we wish to become. And when you pause to look closely, the philosophy hidden in your favorite stories may reveal more about your life than you ever imagined. Think about it. Every story, no matter how lighthearted or fantastical, carries within it an idea about the world, morality, and the human condition. Superhero films ask us about justice and sacrifice. Sitcoms quietly explore friendship, belonging, and the meaning of happiness. Fantasy series tackle the timeless battle between good and evil, destiny and free will. Even the comedies we laugh at are rarely meaningless. They are teaching us subtly and persistently about how to live, relate to others, and navigate chaos with humor. Pop culture, in this sense, is philosophy in disguise, smuggled into our minds through the stories we love most. Take superheroes, for instance. On the surface, they are colorful figures battling villains with superhuman powers. But why do we love them so much? Because they remind us of the eternal question: what does it mean to be good in a world filled with injustice? Spider-Man's famous line, "With great power comes great responsibility," is not just a comic book phrase. It is a moral lesson that echoes Aristotle's ethics and Kant's duty. Batman's struggle is not just about fighting crime. It is about wrestling with inner darkness, trauma, and the blurred line between justice and vengeance. When you watch a superhero film, you're not only witnessing action, you're participating in a centuries-old dialogue about virtue, justice, and the human spirit. But philosophy and pop culture doesn't stop with superheroes. Consider science fiction. Shows like Black Mirror or The Matrix don't just entertain. They confront us with the terrifying and fascinating question of reality itself. What is real? How do we know? These are not new questions. Plato asked them in the allegory of the cave, Descartes in his Meditations, and countless thinkers since. But The Matrix made these abstract ideas visceral by showing us humans literally plugged into illusions. Black Mirror takes our current technology and pushes it forward just enough to make us question whether our devices are controlling us more than we control them. These shows remind us that philosophy is not locked away in dusty books. It is alive, pulsing in the media we consume every day. Fantasy stories, too, are drenched in philosophy. Take The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien's world is full of battles, magic, and mythical creatures, but at its core is a profound meditation on power, corruption, and resilience. The One Ring is more than a magical artifact. It is the symbol of temptation, of the burden of power, and the corrupting influence of control. When Frodo carries it, we see the weight of human weakness and the courage it takes to resist. This echoes Nietzsche's warnings about the will to power, as well as the timeless philosophical question of whether absolute power can ever be used for good. Through a fantasy epic, we are exploring the most urgent moral dilemmas of human history. Even the shows we call guilty pleasures are not without meaning. A sitcom like Friends might seem simple on the surface, just 6 people navigating life in New York. But why did it resonate with millions around the world for decades? Because beneath the jokes, it was about belonging, love, identity, and the search for stability in a chaotic world. It whispered a philosophical truth that in a life full of uncertainty, what matters most is connection. Philosophers from Aristotle to Buber have insisted that human flourishing depends on relationships, on the way we show up for one another. And in its own lighthearted way, Friends reminded us of that truth every week. Think of another angle: dystopian stories. Shows like The Handmaid's Tale or 1984 adaptations are not just speculative fiction. They are philosophers warning us about the dangers of unchecked power, authoritarianism, and the fragility of freedom. These stories force us to ask, how much control should society have over the individual? What happens when ideology overrides humanity? Philosophers like Hobbes, Locke, and Foucault debated the balance between power and freedom, and now, through pop culture, we get to experience those questions viscerally. When you watch such a show, you're not just seeing fiction, you're being invited into an ethical and political conversation that has shaped civilizations. Here's the fascinating part. We often underestimate pop culture because it feels accessible, fun, and even frivolous at times. Yet the very accessibility is its strength. Not everyone will sit down to read Kant's Critique of Pure Reason or Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. But millions will watch The Matrix, Breaking Bad, or Game of Thrones. And in doing so, they unknowingly wrestle with philosophical questions. Is morality absolute or relative? Does power corrupt inevitably? Can the ends ever justify the means? These are not small questions. They are the essence of philosophy, and they are woven seamlessly into the fabric of the stories that capture our imagination. If you pay attention, your favorite show is likely speaking directly to your own hidden questions. Why do we root for anti-heroes like Walter White or Tony Soprano, even when they do terrible things? They embody the complexity of human morality, showing us that good and evil are not black and white, but intertwined within the human heart. Why do we fall in love with coming-of-age stories? Because they remind us of our own transitions, our own fears, and our longing for meaning. The shows and films that resonate most deeply with us often mirror the philosophical struggles we are already living through, even if we don't recognize it at first. But let's step even deeper. What if the shows we love are not just mirrors, but blueprints? A show like Black Mirror does not simply reflect technology's dangers. It instructs us, through cautionary tales, about the values we are in danger of losing. Each episode works like a modern allegory, similar to Plato's cave. The characters mistake shadows on the wall, digital identities, artificial pleasures, for reality. And when one dares to break free, the truth is overwhelming, sometimes unbearable. Is this not a reminder that our own reliance on screens may be a cave of our own making? Pop culture often sneaks philosophy into our lives without us even noticing. Think about The Matrix. When Morpheus asks Neo to choose between the red pill and the blue pill, it's more than a science fiction plot twist. It's a direct question to us. Do we prefer comfortable illusions, or are we willing to face unsettling truths? Millions who watched that scene fell to shiver because it wasn't just Neo's choice. It was theirs. Philosophy, through pop culture, stops being a dry classroom subject and becomes a decision we make every single day. Even seemingly lighthearted shows like The Simpsons or Rick and Morty deal with profound philosophical issues. Homer Simpson, in all his bumbling simplicity, raises the eternal question, what does it mean to live a good life? He often chooses pleasure over reason, comfort over virtue. Yet somehow, he remains relatable, because most of us struggle with the same contradictions. Meanwhile, Rick Sanchez pushes us to face the abyss of nihilism. If nothing matters in a multiverse of infinite possibilities, what is left to hold on to? The show doesn't give easy answers, but it forces us to wrestle with the terrifying freedom of meaninglessness. And then, there are the shows about heroes. Game of Thrones isn't just political intrigue. It's a meditation on power, morality, and fate. The battle for the Iron Throne forces characters to decide, is it better to rule through fear or love? Is honor worth more than survival? These aren't just fantasy questions. They're the same dilemmas leaders and individuals face every day. When we watch these characters succeed, betray, or fall, we're actually exploring our own moral compass. Let's not forget superhero stories, either. On the surface, Marvel and DC may look like escapist entertainment, but at their heart, they wrestle with timeless philosophical conflicts. Superman embodies the question of moral responsibility. If you have power, do you have the duty to use it, even when it costs you your peace? Batman, on the other hand, embodies the philosophy of shadow work. He embraces his trauma and inner darkness, turning it into a tool for justice. These stories remind us that philosophy isn't abstract. It lives in the choices of every hero, and by extension, in the choices of every one of us. What's fascinating is how pop culture democratizes philosophy. You don't need to read Kant to grapple with questions about duty. You don't need to open Nietzsche to wrestle with nihilism. The stories on your screen bring those concepts to you in the language of drama, emotion, and narrative. That's why these shows stay with us. They speak in symbols, in archetypes, in unforgettable characters who act out our deepest questions. So next time you binge your favorite series, ask yourself, what idea is this show planting in me? Am I learning about freedom, power, morality, or the fragility of truth? Because make no mistake, every show teaches. Even the so-called mindless ones slip ideas into our subconscious. Perhaps the real question is not whether pop culture is philosophical, but whether we are paying enough attention to its philosophy. The meaning of your favorite show may not just be about entertainment. It might be about shaping who you are, how you think, and what you value. When we recognize that, we become active participants in the story. We don't just consume culture. We interpret it, question it, and allow it to change us. So let me ask you, what show has changed the way you see the world? Was it a comedy that taught you to laugh at life's absurdities, or a dark drama that forced you to confront uncomfortable truths? Share it in the comments. I'd love to know which stories have left their mark on you. Because in the end, philosophy is not locked away in dusty books or hidden behind complicated language. It's alive in every frame of film, every line of dialogue, every character's choice. It's in the heroes we root for, the villains we fear, and even the fools we laugh at. Pop culture is our modern mythology, and like the myths of old, it tells us who we are and who we might become. So the next time you press play, remember this. You're not just watching a show. You're watching yourself, reflected in story, symbolism, and struggle. And perhaps, hidden in that reflection, is the wisdom you've been searching for all along. If this video gave you something to think about, make sure to like it, share it with someone who loves philosophy as much as you do, and subscribe for more deep dives into the ideas hidden all around us.